Good afternoon. We have our second town hall starting. I think we're going to have, we're expecting about 1,000 people on the call, so bear with us as we wait a few minutes for the entire group to populate in.
Christina, you're still on. You're still off mute. We can hear your background noise.
Spencer, do you have a count for us?
Yes, sir. We're at 860 attendees right now and climbing.
Okay, we'll just wait another minute or so. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today on our second town hall meeting. I'm Alfred Sanchez. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, and along with my colleague, Mike Finney, the president and CEO of the Beacon Council, we're glad to welcome you to this second virtual town hall sponsored jointly by the Beacon Council and by the Greater Miami Chamber. On today's call, you're going to hear from Mayor Jimenez, Victoria Guerrero from the SBA, and Pablo Pino from TD Bank. We'll also be joined somewhere around 2:30 by Senator Marco Rubio, who will enlighten us a little bit about some of the latest information coming down from the CARES Act. Although none of us are probably at this point baby Zoomers, I do want to be able to do some housekeeping so that we ensure an efficient meeting. The first thing I want to go over is that in order to manage the conversation, all the participants will be muted until after all of our panelists present. The second thing is that there will be Q&A, and we are allowing ample time at the end of all the presentations. And to submit your question, please go to the Q&A tab, which can be found at the bottom of your control bar. Click on raise hand and submit your question in writing. Questions will only be drawn from the Q&A tab. We will have our administrator at that point, Spencer Pilot, read the questions to the panelists. There are probably many more questions we're going to have than we can have time to answer verbally, so we have a group of experts working behind the scenes to provide as many answers to you as possible, and you'll find those directly in the chat and Q&A areas. Thank you for your cooperation as we really try to make this meeting as productive as possible and get as many of your questions answered as possible. Okay, so we have a lot to go over, and we want to have plenty of time, as I said, for the questions and answers. So let me introduce our first speaker, Mayor Carlos Jimenez, who last week asked us to put this meeting again together as we get more details after Congress passed the CARES Act. Mr. Mayor, I leave it to you. Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Yep.
We can hear you.
Getting better. I'm getting better at this. Yeah. Okay. I want to, thanks, Alfred, for that introduction. I certainly appreciate everybody that's joining us for this town hall. Discussion about the CARES Act and the many ways that we can support our local businesses and employees is vital to Miami-Dade County success. This, to me, and I've told to my staff, is probably the #1 thing we're going to be focused in on. It's not so much, hey, how much is Miami-Dade County government going to be recouping? How can we help our small businesses and their employees to get everything that they deserve from this act? And so it's vital to our recovery. It's vital to our success as a county. And I want to thank the chamber and also the Beacon Council for organizing this town hall. And I'm glad that more than 1,000 people signed up, and I hope you're all here because this is really going to be, I think, very informative. I want to thank all the panelists, the organizations, the insight, support, including CareerSource, the U.S. Small Business Administration, obviously Senator Marco Rubio, who I believe was a prime sponsor of this bill and how it's going to work. And I think it's great that we got him coming in a little bit later to give us his insights. You know, all of our local businesses and employees are really facing difficult times as we confront COVID-19. We've taken some very difficult decisions, and believe me, I as mayor, as I took those decisions, always looking at what's going to happen to our economy. But number one is our health, and believe me, these are difficult decisions that I really wish I didn't have to make. Senator Rubio also will share with us the details about the CARE Act and how much it will bring much needed federal support to our state, our county, to help meet the growing economic challenges of COVID-19. There are many resources to help businesses deal with the financial impact of COVID-19. People can get direct advice by emailing beaconhelp@beaconcouncil.com. That's beaconhelp@beaconcouncil.com. They can all start working on applying for Florida emergency bridge loans by calling 833-832-4494. I'm going to repeat that again, 833-832-4494. Small in the Florida SBDC has a disaster hotline for small businesses at 866-737-7232, 866-737-7232. Miami-Dade, we've worked hard to keep essential businesses open by setting some very clear and firm guidelines. And I reiterate that every day. I want to keep you open, but you have to maintain these guidelines. You have to maintain social distancing. Public safety, public health comes first. The only way to protect as much as those employees and all of our residents who need the vital goods and services provided by the community's business, both large and small. Also, we're keeping Port Miami open and operational for cargo service. That will help bring our residents the vital supplies that we need, including food, medicine, and fuel, and also keep a lot of people employed as long as they maintain social distancing. By setting strict safety standards, our smaller businesses like restaurants have been able to provide warm meals to residents. Several of my emergency orders in the past 2 weeks have tightened the rules. You can find all that information about the latest emergency orders at miamidade.gov/coronavirus. You know, today I issued another emergency order that we're going to shut down what's called adult daycare. Very difficult situation for us and very difficult to solve the problem. I think we have, but adult daycares are going to be shut down too. We want to protect our elderly. Today I'm working on another emergency order to encourage businesses to allow their workers to use masks, gowns, and other personal protective equipment that will keep them safe on the job. Aside from the regulatory work that we have accomplished in the past couple of weeks, local organizations throughout our county have stepped up to help, keep our residents and businesses functioning and our residents cared for during difficult times. And some examples are local radio stations are offering free ad spots to promote South Florida businesses. Mentoring programs like the SBDC at FIU are helping entrepreneurs connect with local and federal assistance. And recovery task forces like Chemicals Latin American Chamber of Commerce are walking businesses through the process of applying for loans. And that's also something that we're going to be helping everybody with. I look forward to hearing the panelists today on the ways that we can move forward together. I asked the Beacon Council and the Greater Chamber, the Greater Miami Chamber, and Miami-Dade County. I want us to work together so that we can help all the small businesses in their application process. Sometimes this application process can be burdensome, hopefully not. The good news about this entire program, it gives you 2.5 times your monthly payroll, and it's in terms of a loan, but eventually can become all a grant, basically a forgivable loan. That goes a long way, and so I want as many businesses to take advantage of this so that they can keep their employees on the payroll, and that, hey, the tragedy of this COVID-19 doesn't, go past just the human toll, lives, and suffering, but also the economic, tragedy that we may end up if we didn't have this program. And so, again, thank you to the President, thank you to Senator Rubio and Congress for passing it. And now it's the nitty-gritty. The devil's always in the details. Hopefully, those details are not so daunting that we can't get most, and not all, of our small businesses and businesses to take advantage of it, so that we can really, mitigate the impact of this COVID-19 as much as we can. Again, thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions once all the panelists are done.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and let me introduce my colleague, Mike Finney, now from the Beacon Council.
Thanks a lot, Alfred, and Mr. Mayor, thank you for the introductory comments and overview of actions being taken by Miami-Dade County. I thought I would try and frame a few issues and activities that we have underway. Mayor Jimenez referenced several of those. Alfred has referenced some. So I thought I'd add a little bit more detail behind the activities we have underway. First and foremost, we've sized up the overall impact on businesses to be in the range of nearly 90,000 businesses in Miami-Dade County that is impacted by this. And we're looking at everyone who would be defined as a small business per the CARES Act. So that includes small companies, sole proprietors, gig economy workers, 1099 consultants, et cetera. So we tried to make sure we don't miss anyone. We've been working very closely with Miami-Dade Tax Collector's Office, and I guess I could also say Mayor Jimenez as the tax collector, to ensure that we don't miss anyone. So the next big step is to begin doing direct outreach to these 90,000 or so businesses that we have here in Miami-Dade County, so that we can ensure that every single business that wants to can take advantage of what the CARES Act has to offer. So in order to pull that off, we're in the process of developing a web portal, and I know there's a lot of that activity underway. But this will be really meaningful, and we're working in partnership with organizations like Slalom Consulting, Microsoft, Citibank, Benworth Capital, McKinsey and Company, and several other technology partners to really stand up a website that will allow us to do a few really important things. First and foremost, we'll be able to engage targeted small businesses in our community in a proactive way. We'll be able to very quickly determine their eligibility for the CARES program and then get them redirected to an appropriate SBA lender. In most cases, it will be their existing bank, and I know the banks are all teed up and ready to go, and I know we're going to hear from Pablo Pino shortly about that. But the nice thing is if you have an existing bank and if it's an SBA lender, there will be a redirect process that will happen. We'll also highlight some of the other programs that are available. There are actually other state and federal programs, workforce programs that can also assist. And so all of these resources that represent financial opportunities for our businesses, we're going to highlight those as a part of this portal that we're standing up. The URL that we're going to use is bizhelp.miami. bizhelp.miami is the URL that we're going to use. So please take note of that. Our expectation is that it will go live by end of business tomorrow. So you'll have it available to you pretty much late Thursday afternoon and Friday so that you can start accessing the information we have available. The other thing that we're doing is we're trying to make sure that those individuals who call in or who go to the website and actually need information beyond what's readily available there have access to connect with somebody. So the other thing that we intend on doing, and this is a wonderful idea that we've been in discussions with Miami-Dade County and CareerSource about, is standing up a virtual call center. And the intent is to have a physical location to be determined where individuals who need access to technology can go to get technology so that they can actually get an application submitted if they're having challenges with their own, or where they can simply get routine questions answered if they've bumped into problems in terms of filling out the application. There may be some other information they need and they don't know quite where to go to get it. We'll have technical experts there that can provide them with the support they're going to need. Partners like the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, our universities and others who are partnering with us on this initiative will be there available to provide the technical expertise that will be needed. And again, the plan is to do all this in a virtual way. The other thing is that CareerSource South Florida has submitted a request to the federal government for a national emergency grant. Assuming they're successful, we'll be able to hire a significant number of people to support the call center operation as a result of that. We've been informed by Rick Beasley, the executive director, that he has some money available now from his existing funds that can help get the staff started. But in order to fully staff up, we'll need some of the funds that likely will come from the National Emergency Grant. The other thing that I want to mention, just a couple of quick things, is that we are getting a lot of inquiries from businesses that are looking to either buy or sell medical supplies, the PPE that we've heard so much about in the news media. And a lot of Miami companies are already starting to step up and play a role in making that happen. And literally every time I turn on the news, there's a new Miami company that's offering a good or a service, which is absolutely wonderful. We now have tracked more than 70 different requirements that have come directly to us from our healthcare system. And they're asking us if we can, through our partnerships and relationships, help them find either local sources or sources around the world that can provide this very important PPE. So we've now started to set up a B2B exchange that will allow us to facilitate those kinds of connections. The World Trade Center of Miami and the South Florida Manufacturers Association are working closely with us to help vet those companies. So if you are someone who think you have something to sell, we will likely engage one of our partners, World Trade Center or South Florida Manufacturers Association, to actually do a little bit of due diligence on your products or services to make sure that they meet the requirements of the medical or the healthcare professionals who are asking for them. We expect to see a lot more of this, and we think this is a prelude to a bigger initiative that's being led by the Health Foundation of South Florida to launch an anchor alliance, where all of our anchor institutions will be looking to buy more goods and services locally. And as it turns out, the hospitals are some of the anchors that we've already been working with. And so it's great that we have a chance to at least pilot it a little bit, even though it's under somewhat duress. The last thing that I'll mention, and then I'll hand it off, is that a lot of businesses are stepping up in wonderful ways to support their employees. And I just want to highlight a couple. And there's been many others, so please don't feel as if you got missed. It's just that there are so many who are doing wonderful things. I wanted to highlight a couple. I had a call yesterday from Miami Marlins management team, and they wanted to make sure that we were sharing with the community that they've made a very substantial commitment to help all the concession employees who would normally be working in March and April, and they're unfortunately unemployed, and also their own part-time staff who work the stadiums during the game days to provide concierge service and usher services to all the visitors. And those individuals are without income because they're not playing games. And so the Marlins has committed $1 million that will allow those individuals to be paid for all the games they miss during March and April. And that, again, that's just one example of many employers that are doing great stuff. Another contrasting employer is Florida Blue. We know they're one of the leading healthcare insurers in the state of Florida and frankly in the United States under the Blue brand. But they have in fact announced that they're going to forego any patient costs for hospital stays and admissions as they undergo treatment for the COVID-19 virus. They also have set up a 24/7 bilingual emotional support hotline. So to help individuals who are struggling with this, as so many of us are. Again, just a couple of examples of employers that are doing wonderful stuff. And I thought it was important to signal a little bit of that. I look forward to any questions later.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the great work you're doing. I think you mentioned some extremely important initiatives. And like you said, there are so many. We've got FIU that's actually printing masks for our healthcare and first responders, and we've got Baptist Health and others, FIU. Everybody's really stepping up, and it's really heartwarming in the middle of all of this, I guess, bad news to see how our community has come together. And I think that says a lot about us as Miamians. Next, I think I've been searching through the chat and Q&A area and see that there's a lot of questions about, is there an application open now? If not, when is it going to open up? We've got Pablo Pino from TD Bank, who is in charge of that whole area of the SBA application area. And I know that Pablo, TD Bank is one of the largest SBA lenders, but we have many other banks in this area that do that. But we're really glad to have you be a part of this panel. Let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alfred, and thank you for putting this together with the Beacon Counselor, and hope everyone is safe. Basically, when we actually speak to our colleagues in town at other banks, we're all kind of in the same boat. As everyone knows, the act was approved on Friday afternoon, and most banks or all banks are actually waiting for the SBA to put out the standard operating procedures. And we're expecting that that'll probably happen hopefully this afternoon or first thing tomorrow. So everyone's up and running hopefully by Friday. And banks are scrambling, and I guarantee you most banks today are working, the SBA officers with the coming up with a program and an application. As everyone knows, depending on your SIC code, up to 500 employees per location as their mayor mentioned, your average payroll of 2.5 times. And if you use it for the right, the purposes of mainly a payroll, right? And one of the documents that we recommend is, I believe it's the form 941 and 940 that has a lot of your payroll information there of what your payroll was in the last year, and then they average that out at 2.5 times. If you prove our understanding of the bill is once you obtain the money, the funds up to potentially $10 million, and then after June 30th, we go back to the SBA and basically prove that the funds were used for these purposes to pay your employees, to pay your rent, to pay the interest on your mortgage, things like that, your benefits, and then a portion, all of it or a good portion of it will be forgiven. The portion that's not forgiven, there's been mixed information. We initially thought that it would be payable over 10 years. We understand from initial reviewing of the bill that there was no personal guarantee or collateral. So it's basically an unsecured loan, the portion that wouldn't be forgiven, right? However, yesterday we learned that it's not 10 years, it could actually be 2 years. So again, it's evolving, and not only TD Bank, but all our community banks are kind of running and working with the SBA and trying to get that information out there. I think best practice is, and as Mike mentioned, is the best recommendation is usually go to your existing bank, because they have all your information, know your customer, so you basically could potentially have a faster process through there instead of going to a brand new bank that they need to do all the due diligence and know your customer requirements. So that's in a nutshell. I sit on a board of a non-for-profit, and they reached out to their existing bank, and it was the same, pretty much the same information. We did something like this at the Beacon Council a day or two ago, and again, we're hearing from all our partner competitor banks that we're standing by, waiting for those procedures to come out.
Thank you for that. This is an ever-changing situation, I guess, as all the regulations are coming down. So please stay tuned. And we want to thank all of TD Bank and all the banker community that I know you're all working long hours trying to get up and running and be able to get open for everyone. It's going to be a flood and avalanche once all this opens up. So I'm glad the Beacon Council, the Chamber, and others are going to be here to help out. We also have Victoria Guerrero from the South Florida District of the SBA, and Victoria was with us last week and gave some incredible information. Victoria, let me turn it over for you.
Thank you very much. And if you just give me 1 second here, let me share my screen.
Absolutely.
Please let me know if you see my screen. I'm just going to go through some quick slides here. I wanted to take a moment to speak about two of the main programs that the SBA is providing. One, of course, is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan that many may already know about, and the other one is the PPP, or Paycheck Protection Program. So let's talk about the first one, since that's already been mentioned a few times. Just to give a quick overview, the Paycheck Protection Program is a loan that's designed to provide a direct incentive for small businesses to keep workers on the payroll. SBA will forgive loans if all employees are kept on the payroll for 8 weeks and the money is used for payroll, rent, mortgage interest, or utilities. The Paycheck Protection Program will be available through June 30th, 2020. Now, who can apply? Small businesses with less than 500 employees, including sole proprietorships, independent contractors, and self-employed persons, private nonprofit organizations, or 501c19 veterans organizations that have been affected by the coronavirus. Small businesses in the hospitality and food industry with more than one location could also be eligible at the store and location level if the store employs less than 500 workers. So essentially, this means each store location could be eligible. Now, how to apply? Many have already mentioned you would go through an existing SBA 7A lender. We'll business owners to first check with their bank. Chances are that they are already an approved SBA lender. You can also go to other regulated lenders that will be made available. Every day we're onboarding new lenders onto our approved SBA 7A profile. So you can consult with your local lenders, and lenders are beginning to process these applications as soon as April 3rd of this year. To talk a little bit about the loan details and forgiveness, fully forgiven if the funds are used for payroll costs, interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. Now, due to the likely of the high subscription to this particular loan, at least 75% of the forgiven amount must be used for payroll purposes. Loan payments will also be deferred for 6 months. As mentioned, there's no collateral, no personal guarantees that will be required. Neither the government nor lenders will charge small businesses any fees for this. Forgiveness is based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining the salary levels, and forgiveness will be reduced if full-time headcount declines or if salary and wages is decreased. Now, this loan maturity has a maturity of 2 years with an interest rate of 0.5. This is as of yesterday at 3:30 p.m. when we received this information from SBA headquarters. Now, to talk a little bit about the economic injury disaster loan, this is a federal loan from the SBA, and capital can be used to pay off fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills. The loan, of course, is not intended to replace any lost sales or profits or for any types of expansions. Eligible entities do have until December 18th of this year to apply, and business owners can request up to $2 million in funding. The interest rate, as some may know, is 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for private nonprofit organizations, with a repayment term of up to 30 years. No payments, of course, will be due for the first year. Now, this is something that has been recently added. Business owners will also be able to receive an advancement of up to $10,000. This advancement, from what I've been told from headquarters, is usually dispersed within 3 days of a completely, fully, and approved loan. The loan advance, of course, will provide economic relief for businesses that are experiencing temporary loss of revenue, and the funds, as mentioned, will be available 3 days after the successful application. Now, this loan advance, a good thing about that is that the loan advance itself will not have to be repaid. Now, what is the criteria for the economic injury disaster loan? Well, folks need to have an acceptable credit history. If you're not certain, I would still say to apply because the criteria is becoming more relaxed. We're trying to help as many folks as we can. Reference to repayment, SBA must determine that the applicant business has the ability to repay the loan. And eligibility, it's very important that the business is physically located where the disaster has been designated, and that the loss is due to the disaster, not due to a downward in an economy or for any other reasons. And just quickly, collateral requirements, anything over $25,000 will request a collateral. SBA can utilize real estate for this when it is available, but SBA will not decline your loan for lack of collateral. You'll just have to prove and pledge that you will be able to make the repayments within the time frame given. Quickly, additional information. The applicants do not have to go to a bank. This particular loan comes directly from the U.S. Treasury. It will be an electronic transfer to your bank. There's no cost to apply, no obligation to take the loan if it's offered. Now, if you do have more than one SBA disaster loan, you can still apply for this or for any of our loans. The thing is, you cannot consolidate the loans. If more funds are ever needed in the future, you can request an increase. If you don't need all the funds, you can request a decrease. There is no fee for that. And if your loan for any reason is denied, the applicant does have up to 6 months to provide new information and to request a reconsideration. Now, some folks have asked what's the difference between profit and nonprofit and private nonprofit. An eligible private nonprofit is a non-government agency that currently has either an effective ruling from the U.S. IRS granting tax exemption under the 501c, D, or E of the IRS code, or they have a satisfactory evidence from the state that the non-revenue producing organization or entity is a nonprofit, one that is organized or doing business under state law. So how do we apply for all of this? You go to sba.gov/disaster, Or you can contact any of the numbers on your screen, 1-800-659-2955, or disaster customer service at sba.gov if you wish to send them an email. Now remember, for the payment protection program, you would need to go to your local lender to apply. If you do need assistance with your applications, feel free to contact our small business development centers, SCORE chapters, women business centers, or veterans business outreach center. You can also, of course, contact your local SBA. To find the nearest location, just go to sba.gov/local-assistance. And these are just some additional contact information that might be of use to you. If you are at your computer, you can review these links. If you ever have any questions, you can always go to sba.gov/South Florida, and there you'll also see a list of webinars that we will be doing in virtual office hours within the next 2 weeks to assist our small business owners. And that's basically it. Thank you so much.
Alfred, this is Mayor Jimenez, Carlos Jimenez.
Please.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments about folks. How can they get this presentation so they can have it handy? Is that possible, or is it?
We will have the entire recording and the chat, and also all of the presentations will also be made available. We'll post it up and send it out to all the registrants for the webinar, but it'll also be on the Beacon Council's page and on our page as well.
Great.
So those were great questions, some great comments, some great information. A lot of the chat and a lot of the questions are really targeted to that. Let me just jump in before I turn it over to Spencer and ask one that it looks like has been blowing up is, Victoria, maybe you could answer this one about the 501c status. There was some early discussion about whether it was going to be only to 501c3s. From what I hear and what I saw come down in the latest from the U.S. Treasury, it sounds like that distinction has not been made. It's any 501c, anyone 501c, D, or E, correct? That's true.
With that, yes. Yes, you're absolutely correct right now. As of this moment, I have not heard anything about the 501c6s being part of this particular program. Now, as time goes on, things do tend to change, so I'm not saying that that may not have it happen. At this moment, I don't have that information. Right now, as it stands, it's not part of this program, the 501c6s.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me turn it over to, we've got a lot of questions. I'm going to turn it over to Spencer, who will be jockeying through the questions. Spencer, why don't you take over?
Yes, thank you, Alfred. And our first question is for Mayor Jimenez. And Mayor, we understand that things are changing by the hour. This person asked that with Governor DeSantis's recent 30-day stay-at-home order that's going to begin Thursday at midnight, does that change any of what we're doing in Miami-Dade County with respect to stay-at-home, or is it business as usual?
It's our message is safer at home. So everybody needs to stay home unless they're doing some kind of essential activity. And that's been the norm here for a couple of weeks. And so his order is actually crafted along the same lines as Miami-Dade County's. I'm not sure if he may have even given us a shout out that he's actually following what we're doing here in Miami-Dade County. So things really don't change here in Miami-Dade. Things do change daily because there are other orders that are given daily. Like today, on Friday, all of our adult daycares are going to be closed. And today I issued another order about cleanliness and how you disinfect in some businesses. But his stay-at-home order basically is the same as our safer at home initiative here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our second question is for Victoria from Donna. Donna asks, I applied for SBA federal SBA federal loans, the emergency bridge loans, and will those applications conflict with the new CARES Act loan programs that she's going to apply for with her bank? So essentially, she's already applied for what she can. Will applying for the CARES Act provide any conflict, or can she apply for those resources as well?
She can absolutely apply for those resources. The fact that you've already applied for a an SBA grant at an earlier time frame does not negate your ability to continue to apply for other programs that might come forward. So you can absolutely apply for that.
Great, thank you. And Victoria, we have another question from Jorge. He asks, what contribution is expected of the owners of companies receiving the SBA loan? And then he continues to clarify, other questions have asked about taxes on the loan and will they be waived as well?
We currently have different programs that we're offering. So when he speaks of the SBA loan, I'm not quite certain which one it is that he's referenced to, but I would love to provide your audience members with our site. If you go to www.sba.gov/disaster, right there in the middle of your page is going to be a section called Funding Options. If you click on there, under Loan, you'll see the Payment Protection Program link. You can click there, and it's going to actually send you to a page where you will see all of the programs that are available for our small businesses. There you will see the eligibility criteria, the steps on how to apply, and it will also answer some frequently asked questions that are provided for each of our programs.
Thank you, Victoria. And Mr. Mayor, we've got a couple questions from folks asking if you could repeat the numbers that you gave earlier in your presentation. Would you mind repeating those?
Sure. Let me look them up again. Okay. So here we are. The Florida Small SBDC has a disaster hotline, small businesses. It's 866-737-7232. That's 866-737-7232. Let me see if there's another. That was one. And let me look for the other one. Okay. You can apply for Florida emergency bridge loans. That you can call 833-832-4494, 833-832-4494. And people also can get direct advice by emailing beaconhelp@beaconcouncil.com. That's beaconhelp@beaconcouncil.com. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
We have a question about the PPP, or the Payroll Protection Program. We've had many people ask what the expected turnaround time is if people are applying for that programming. I know that it's very new, but Victoria or Pablo, can you answer that question?
Thank you for that question. I have not seen what that turnaround time is. Actually, I requested that from headquarters this morning, and I'm waiting to get a response. As I mentioned, we got these details yesterday around 4 p.m., but I don't know if perhaps Pablo has some insight that I don't have.
Yeah, I've been trying to explore that question, and this is very similar to the 7A program, and there are many banks out there that have delegated authority. So my understanding is that this program may run similar to the 7A program, where the banks actually use their delegated authority. But again, waiting to figure out the details and go from there.
Thank you both. We got a question from Marcel. Marcel asks, my partner and I own a food truck business. It's 50-50 ownership with no employees. Can we apply for PPP assistance?
Yes, I believe you can, as long as there is payroll involved and you have all the documents that are requested. And again, if you would like to have a list of specific details, I would go to sba.gov/disaster and go under funding programs.
Thank you. As we know, in Miami-Dade County, there's a lot of people who are foreign nationals, and they are many times business owners as well. John asks, do U.S. small businesses owned by foreign nationals who are living abroad qualify for the PPP program?
That is a very good question, John, and I would have to try to find that information for you. I don't know if maybe I can get your email address from Spencer at some point, and I can return that. I don't know, Pablo, if you might have heard anything in regards to that particular question, but that's a very good question. Thank you for sharing that.
We have not explored that question, but my understanding is, provided someone's a U.S. citizen, normally to qualify for an SBA, any of the SBA loans, I think it's going to be similar requirements, right? But not 100%.
I would hope that the federal government would take a look at that, because there could be some foreign nationals that own some companies here, but the people that are employed, they're all American residents, and so this money's supposed to go to the people that are employed more than anything else.
Right.
Hopefully that there could be some kind of accommodation for the employees, getting their pay and not being laid off. So this is a very important question, because I'm sure we have a lot of folks that work for foreign nationals.
Yes, that's a very good question. I'll make sure to look into that. Thank you.
Next question comes from Mr. O. He says that he just started a business and he's maxed out his credit card, which has made his credit card score lower than he would prefer. He wants to know if that will disqualify him for this assistance. That question can go to either Pablo or to Victoria.
That will not disqualify him. The SBA is really trying hard to relax some of its criteria, and we understand, we're all experiencing this crisis together, and it's unprecedented. So I know that we have relaxed our criteria. I always urge small business owners, do not talk yourself out of applying for a loan. In a typical scenario, perhaps you may not qualify, but that doesn't mean that you won't qualify in today's scenario. So I would recommend to still go ahead and apply for that specific loan.
Thank you. I got a question from Norman, and he's asking about grants versus loans. Mayor, I know that many commissioners have offered mom and pop grants in the past. Are those resources still available for people, even though it's not a traditional COVID method of relief? Are those available for constituents?
Mom and pop grants are still open, and usually that's administered by NANA and headed by Leroy Jones, and that's still available. Those grants are still available.
Thank you. Commissioner Cava has joined us on the line, and she is wanting to ask about the unemployment compensation program. And she's asking how employers can assist people to apply and advocate for upgrades to the system. I believe it's a state of Florida system, but she's wanting to know what we can do to assist folks in applications.
Okay, if I can answer that a little bit, because that's something that's been a topic of conversation in my daily briefings. And I've asked Miami-Dade County what we can do in order to open up some of our centers to help libraries, which are now closed. Maybe we can open them up on an appointment basis to small businesses, unemployment, folks that have been unemployed, to come in and fill out the application process. Apparently, it's a very lengthy process, and it's all automated. There's no paper, so we need to do something for those folks that don't have access to automation and technology, and also those folks that require assistance in filling out what people are telling me it's a pretty lengthy process. So we're on it with Miami-Dade. Hopefully the Beacon Council can help us, and also CareerSource we can all chime in to help those that are applying for it do it, and do it quickly.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Mayor,
Mayor.
I was going to add that the concept that I described earlier of this virtual call center that would actually have a physical location literally ties in with your thinking around the support for the unemployed as well.
Our next question comes from William. William asks, what are the repayment terms for PPP? And if it is not yet known, when can we expect receiving guidance?
I mean, I could jump in here. Initially, we thought it was 10 years. I think Victoria just, based on, as of yesterday afternoon, it sounds like it's more like within 2 years, right? I would imagine that'll be cleared up in the next day or so.
Thank you. And a related follow-up from Elizabeth. She wants to know, do all employees need to be kept on to qualify for PPP, or is 75% of my staff enough?
I believe, the more employees you keep, the larger the amount of potential forgiveness of the debt, right? So it is a formula, but the whole purpose of this is to keep as many employees as you can, provided you could justify the business, right?
I think can Victoria answer that question? Because the message that I've been putting out, and I've been putting out for over a week, is for small businesses to keep all your employees, because I was under the understanding that actually if you let some go, you may be penalized for that. So that's a pretty important question. Victoria, do you have the answer to that?
Yes, that's correct. I was looking up I don't want to misspeak here, so I apologize for my delay. But you're absolutely right there, sir. The intent of the PPP program is really to keep all of your workers intact and employed. If for some reason you do need to let some of those workers go, that amount that would potentially be forgiven will also be reduced. So you will actually have to pay for a certain portion. You will have to pay that back rather than have it forgiven.
Victoria, there's some, this is sort of a follow-up question. There's some question about the loan is forgivable after a year. So what happens during that year? Are payments needing to be made? Will the interest be paid there? And then after that year, will any of that portion paid be part of the forgiven? That was to you, Victoria.
Okay, thank you, sir. Those are very good questions. I don't know the answer offhand. Like I said, we were just given this yesterday at 4 p.m., but I'm going to look for it while we continue with our conversation. And once I find it, I will chime in, or I will put the information on the chat. If you can just give me a few moments here to look for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Spencer, one thing that I think we're also exploring at the bank is that if you have an existing SBA loan, a 7A or a 504, our understanding, and you need to verify with your banks, right? For the next 6 months, the government's going to make those payments directly to the SBA. Again, if you have a 504, so the second piece, the second mortgage, which is typically held by the SBA, the next 6 months will be taken care of it directly by the government. And if you have a 7A, the same thing. So that's information that is in the bill that we're exploring. We believe it's 6 months of relief, and also it's you don't have to repay those 6 months.
Pablo, thank you for that. I'm sorry to interrupt and cut in, but I noticed that Senator Rubio has now joined us. Senator Rubio, I want to welcome you. We've had some incredible presentations and a lot of questions being asked. I know you have very short period of time, so we're very honored to have you be a part of this. And please let me turn over the mic to you.
Well, let me just start. I think I can help answer a lot of these questions since I was involved and since we wrote it, and it was one of those things that it wasn't one of those things where the staff wrote it and we came in at the end and blessed it, and we were actually involved in it. And as I'm hearing you guys talk, I big flashbacks to the actual conversations we were having in these negotiations with Treasury and with my counterparts on the other side of the aisle. On the loan, there's no payments due on this loan if it even becomes one until the maturity date a year from now. That's when it'll begin to accrue. There are also provisions in this bill where Treasury and the Federal Reserve is a guaranteed buyer of these. So if a bank needs it, they can step in within 3 to 5 days is what the legislation requires the regs to be written to take these loans off books. So that there's also legislation that holds the banks harmless. This won't count against your ratios because it's 100% guaranteed. There's no underwriting. So you've got a guaranteed buyer and you've got a guaranteed payer one way or the other. We anticipate that most of these are not going to transition into loans. And in fact, one of the issues we're working through today a little bit is the Treasury came out and said that the interest rate will be 0.5 point, which some in the banking community are concerned about, except that I don't think those loans are going to be loans or that they're even going to be on your books. So on the question of, there was another question that was asked about the what was the other question that was up in the air about the existing loans. So yes, the existing 7As don't have to be paid for 6 months. For that, I know that because I had to go out and get, I think it was $49 billion from the appropriators to pay for that. That was the cost of it for 6 months. And in addition, I saw some comments coming up. Having existing SBA loans, the emergency loans, does not prohibit you from also accessing this program. And in fact, the way the legislation is written requires for there to be a process where someone that went out and got an emergency loan can convert that into this instrument. So a week ago, this Paycheck protection program didn't exist. So a lot of people are going to say, well, if I knew that was going to exist, I would have used that program instead. So there'll be a way to sort of, for lack of a better term, refinance it. I'm not sure the process for that has been set up, but either way, you could have both. I mean, one does not disqualify you from the other.
Senator Rubio, let me congratulate you on this bill. It's fabulous for us here in Miami-Dade, but also for the country. One question that I did have is the banks, and this is forgivable, but the ones that don't end up being forgivable, are they fully guaranteed by the U.S. government so that the banks don't?
They are. Yep, that's exactly right. We started out at 90%, and then we figured, you know what, let's just go all the way because we need this to be utilized. And look, I mean, the best way to think about it is everyone, under 75,000 a year individual, 150 married couple is going to get $1,200 in the mail or $2,400. This is the equivalent of that in the business world. And the fastest way to deliver it, we felt, was through the banking industry. If I told you guys that you have to go to the Miami-Dade Youth Fair grounds and stand in line to have it processed by the government, we would crush the agencies that are already dealing with a bunch of things, and no one would go, right? Because so we felt like the current infrastructure. Let me tell you, I feel fairly confident. I know there's some of the banking industry on here now that I tell this to everybody. If you're a business and have an existing small business banking relationship which most do, that's the ideal place for you to go for this, because they want you to stay in business. You're their customers. They know you're a company. They verified you the day they opened the account, and they probably know more about the payroll than you do, because in many cases they're processing it for you. I think the one area that we remain concerned about is the people who sort of fall in the cracks that may not have, a 1099 gig economy employee or a really small business that may not have an existing banking relationship, or may have one, but not with an institution that participates. And that's the area that I know we want to spend some time attracting people into that space, because it's a big volume and it's a big need. And I know that Treasury and SBA are both working to attract additional lending institutions to step in.
Senator, I asked this before Victoria from the SBA, with the regulations coming down and constantly changing, she wasn't sure. So let me ask you, you may know, there's a lot of question from the 501c6 community as to whether or not the nonprofit status applies to them. I'm not sure if you have any insights to share with that.
Yeah, I do. And the answer is it doesn't. And it's for no other reason than we didn't have enough money. Here, I'm going to tell you guys how this breaks out. When we started, it was $50 billion. Obviously, this thing blew up, got so much bigger. So what we did is we basically went to the Department of Labor Statistics, and what is the non-government payroll in the United States on a weekly basis. And then based on that number, we calculated, they asked us to take on 1099 and gig economy employees. They asked us to take on the small business sector, both if they meet the SBA criteria or are under 500 employees. And then they asked us to take on some in the not-for-profit sector. When you add those three together, you're talking about 80 million people in the United States that are employed in that way. It's a lot. And so it just came down to a numbers issue, really, with that regard. When you open it up to C6s, that's a big universe, and it involves everyone from the American Bar Association to the Chamber of Commerce, and there's no way to write regulations that say these are the good ones and these are not that the ABA is the bad one, but you know what I'm saying? It starts to get complicated. And so it was just a function of money. My biggest fear in all of this is 2 weeks into this, the 350 is gone, right? 80% utilization, everybody jumps on it. We do a great job of making people aware of it, and it's gone. And all of a sudden, or we have new restrictions. Maybe you're operating in a community that didn't have restrictions until today. So all of a sudden you realize, hey, I'm going to need one of these, and there's no money there for you. In normal times, that wouldn't be a problem because we just go back and put another 100 billion. I say that 100 billion, for goodness sake, that's a lot of money, but you know what I mean? I don't know when Congress is going to meet again. We can't vote like this. We can't use Zoom. So unless we can get unanimous approval to do it in the House and Senate to throw more money in there, we can't count on it. That said, I think we could. If we can make this program work, and it's worked so well that it's being fully utilized, I fully anticipate we're going to have to come in and put another $300 billion, not just to expand it to more people, but to extend the period of time covered. But we don't know because we are all, every single one of us are in uncharted territory here. So we'll see what happens.
Senator, this is Mike Finney from the Beacon Council. Something you said really caught my attention, and that was it's conceivable that over the next few weeks, on a first come, first served basis, we could run out of money. And so I raise that because the sense of urgency that we've been trying to operate with, and I know that the leadership locally have been pushing us to operate to, really speaks to what you said. And I just want to make sure that you emphasize that a little bit more with our community, that we really have to move fast. Obviously, we need support from the SBA, the banking community, and all the employers that we have here. And so the work that we're doing to stand this up in this community, it could not be more urgent so that we don't end up someplace in line after the funds have been exhausted.
Yeah, and I think 2 weeks is probably an exaggeration because we anticipate if you took all the eligible businesses, an 80% utilization. That's what the number is based on. But nonetheless, we've never done this before. So I can't tell you how this worked in 1977 or how it worked in 1995. We just don't know. So that's part one. The other sense of urgency is these are, every day that goes by, it becomes harder and harder to reconnect with your workforce. So if, for example, you laid people off, but they're really valuable and you don't want to lose them and you want to bring them back, every day that goes by, that gets harder. They may have moved, they may have found a job somewhere else. They may decide that now's not a good time to go back to work. And in some industries, that's more important than in others. If you run a dry cleaning shop, you just can't hire someone off the street and start operating these machines. There's an amount of training that's involved and things of that nature. And I think that's true in most businesses. So that is one of the senses of urgency. And the other is this: people are going to get laid off. They're going to try to get unemployment. They're going to realize that there isn't a state in this country that has the infrastructure to handle 20,000 to 30,000 calls a day for unemployment benefits. And we're going to have a desperate situation there where people have gone 3 weeks without a paycheck and can't get into the unemployment system that isn't set up to handle that crush. So that's the other angle of it that we're really hurried to get some information out there to people on about the existence of it.
One question, Senator. If let's say I'm a small business owner, I had to lay off people right away. Now I got this program. Hey, I'd love to bring them back and actually give them their back pay. Is that allowed or
Yep.
or it is?
Yep. It
Okay.
is. Yeah. So you can pay it. You can, and we also added benefits. So you may have furloughed them, but continue to pay their health insurance, right? So that's you can do that. You can say I furloughed you for 2 weeks, so I can recoup the money that I spent on health insurance for the 2 weeks. Then I can hire you back, and we set the FTE number because that's what we want employers to handle. They may not. Depending on the size of your business, you may not actually hire the same 50 people, but at some point you'll get there. But we also recognize that there might be some industries where no matter how hard you try, you can't get back to the FTE number. I mean, for example, even as people are getting laid off, CVS, Walgreens, Publix are all hiring, Home Depot. And so somebody might have just gotten a new job and for whatever reason, you can't bring them back. So that's why at the back end of this, when it comes time for forgiveness and to close the books, if you can make a good argument that, look, I tried to hire people back, the market conditions just didn't justify it. There's a way to mitigate against that at the back end. And I know they'll be pretty lenient about it. This was not designed to recoup costs. It was designed as a way to sort of provide a way for businesses to stay attached to their employees for a period of time.
Well, I mean, to me, the most important thing is to give the money back out to the employees. And so if I had furloughed them for 2 weeks thinking, hey, I just don't have money to pay you. Now I do. Can I give them their back pay for 2 weeks or not?
Yeah,
Now,
so you're
it back
saying
and
if
then give
you,
them-
yes. No, the answer is yes. That would be in a law. You can pay it from the period this started. So that might involve bringing somebody back and paying them the 2 weeks that they were laid off, in addition to the 6 weeks going the other way. That's the goal here, right? Is to keep as many people as possible whole. We can't look. This is a lot like the medical crisis that we're facing. There's no vaccine for the shutdown, and I don't think there ever will be a vaccine that can sort of prevent this from happening, because it's already happened. And there's some experimental things that are being tried that might work, may work. This is one of those experimental things. We think it has a really good chance of working. It won't work for everybody, but there's no harm in trying. And I think we can help a lot of people, is the way I would explain it. Probably not a perfect analogy, but it's sort of the way we viewed it.
Don't let
Can I
perfect
ask
be
one
really
question?
good. Yeah.
I have one question for those that are in the banking sector that might be on this call. One of the things I'm concerned about is the physical access to the branch, because some branches are closed, some branches because of the physical distancing requirements. If I'm a small business, I imagine that our goal was, because the application form is about 2 pages and then some language at the back end of it. Is there a way that some of this with your existing clients is going to be done online and make it easier that way? And if not, are there opportunities to create alternative places that people can go and apply in person? That's one of the concerns I have, where I'm concerned that we're not supposed to be putting 10 people together at once, but there might be 10 business owners that need to be somewhere at once to sort of fill this out, especially in the early days.
Senator, the requirements here are 50% capacity and
Okay.
6 feet apart, but all financial institutions can remain open. So
Yeah, no, I know they're not. Right, Mayor. I think some of them have just made the decision to shut some branches and leave others open. And look, a lot of banking's gone online these days anyways, but I'm just curious. I saw one question pop up that there's a form online at treasury.gov that you can go on and you can look at it. That's kind of the uniform. And theoretically, we should be launching on Friday. At least some of the lenders will be ready to go on Friday, we hope, at least for their existing clients. And then with the small business sector. And then on April 10th, the following Friday, open up to the 1099 employees. And it's just being staggered because of the nuances of building out the capacity. So the form is you don't have to wait till Friday to fill it out. And I know for a fact that there are a number of banks that have already begun outreach and contact with their small business clients, and their small business divisions have already been in contact with them.
Senator, this is Spencer, the moderator. One of our panelists is Pablo Pino, who's a market president for TD Bank. Pablo, do you want to answer the senator's questions about what TD is doing with their physical locations?
Olivo Suto, who's the chair, could jump in as well. But in terms of our locations, we have them. Our hours have changed mainly from 9:30 to 4 p.m., but we keep our certain lobbies open and also the drive-through. And especially on the commercial side, everything is being done electronically via email. And that's why, as the senator mentioned, working with your bank that knows you already and that vetted you and they did know your customer is very beneficial. It would speed up the process. We're trying to, figure out an app for this process. Initially, we may start with a paper app, but eventually we will get to a digital, but that shouldn't stop us from processing. And again, most of our stores are open, definitely on the drive-through side. And on the commercial side, it's typically over the phone and via email.
That's great. And the other point I would make is I've heard from a number of small businesses who have relationships at TD, Wells Fargo, some of the other banks, and even some of the community banks. They actually are doing their payroll using some of the systems that you guys have created for your small business clients. So, I mean, you talk about the ideal one-stop shop for a small business. They know who you are. They've already validated you as a business when they open the account, given all the laws that now govern finance. And they've been handling your payroll theoretically in some cases for some period of time. So, I mean, again, you can go anywhere. But I'm just saying for me anyway, it would make sense to sort of leverage my existing relationship, because they know more about your finances than you probably do in a lot of ways.
Senator, thank you for that. I'm gonna try to get us back on track, getting some questions from
Yep.
the folks who are participating. I know you have limited number of amount of time, so Spencer, if you have some questions directed to the senator, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Senator Rubio, we've received a lot of questions from folks who are 1099 employees, and they're wanting to know what that process is like for them. For example, if they're a gig worker, do they need to wait on that entity that's sort of the umbrella to apply on their behalf, or should they take the reins and go ahead and apply on their own? Can you walk us through that?
No, they would apply on their own, and I think the payroll. I think one of the reasons why they're going to start on the 10th is because they need to figure out the system for determining payroll. In the gig economy, depending on what you do, that payroll could potentially fluctuate by how long you've been doing it. Are you in an area that's seasonal? So there's a lot of complexity to that, and I can tell you we've never done 1099 in the past, self-employed and so forth in the past. So I think that's one of the reasons for the 7-day delay, is to provide more certainty for what the payroll confirmation will look like. But it will not be through whoever it is that's paying them. It'll have to be them directly. And again, my view there is that if that is being deposited somewhere in a banking account, and whether you've set up a corporate entity or you're doing it personally, that would be an ideal place for you to start. But again, that's a universe that we wanted to cover, but we've never covered before. So there's going to be a little bit of work done on sort of creating the parameters. Any input or insight people have on that would be useful. We've talked to some of the companies like Uber and others that employ people in the space to kind of get a sense for what that process would look like. But that by no means is representative of the entire 1099 community.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that clarification. We received several questions, and we talked a little bit about it earlier before you joined. But there are many foreign nationals in Miami that operate businesses here that are headquartered in Miami and employ staff in Miami. Are they eligible for the PPP?
So that's an important question, because it's something we're confirming right now. The answer, the intent of I can tell you what the intent of the legislation was, and the intent was yes. If you look at the form as it's currently written, it requires you to show you're either a legal permanent resident or a citizen of the United States. But the current SBA standards, there are current SBA standards that would apply to someone who's here on an investment visa. They're legally in the country, but they're not citizens or legal permanent residents. There's a lot of businesses in our community that are structured in that way. And it is the argument that we have made very strongly, that it was entirely our intent to cover them. Because again, remember, this is not just about them. This is about the people that work for them. That's why it's called the Paycheck Protection Program. And under the SBA guidelines for someone in that category do have some requirements, like the business. I believe it's a 3 or 4 year period that you have to have been open. It can't be something you opened last week. And some requirements, but it would still cover the vast majority of the people in our community that find themselves in that position. But again, the argument we've been making is the SBA standards for that are a good starting point, but we want to be as inclusive as possible, because this is not about the owners, although it helps the owners. This is about the workers, the people that work for them. And whether you work for someone who is a resident of a citizen of France, but is here legally and operates a business, or whether it's someone who lives next door to you, is irrelevant to the fact that your job is just as valuable. So it was written to be inclusive. We're pushing for it to be clear so that there is no confusion about that topic.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. Roberto asks, if there was an amount that was forgiven in this process, do they need to pay taxes on that amount in the future?
No.
Okay.
I'm only chuckling because that was one of the last things we caught before we sent it to bill drafting. I said, hey, by the way, remembering some of the loan forgiveness programs in 07, 08, is this become taxable income for the entity or the employee? And so there's provision in there that says it's not taxable.
Thank you. I appreciate you catching that too. That was a great snag. We got a question from an individual who says he wants some clarification regarding nonprofits, 501c3s. Apparently at his company, they have some staff that are 1099 who are independent subcontractors. Will that nonprofit still be eligible for those loans?
Well, it depends on what their full-time equivalency is on their employees. But if you're covering them, if they're 1099, then they're applying under their own EIN or their own status. And this was designed to reach your full-time employees, and we'll have to make sure that that's how it's implemented. But that was the design here, is who are your full-time or full-time equivalency employees that are on your payroll that you're paying payroll tax on. If they're 1099 contractors, then that would not count towards your payroll number. They would have to apply under their own status.
All right, thank you. Sheila asked, does this program apply to startups that have been self-financing, including their payroll, that were in the process of getting ready to launch?
Well, that's not as long as they were paying payroll. You mean they were not in operation yet? They were standing up as a business? The answer is that we didn't put anything in there that would disqualify them from it. You have to prove that you had payroll as of February 15th. Whether you were profitable or not, whether you were operating or not, whether you were still setting up the shop but weren't really selling products or services yet, what was not part of the equation and how we decided this. So obviously you can't have started a business, yesterday and suddenly qualify for this. But then that's why the date more or less was set about mid-February in terms of establishing your payroll number. There is some nuance to the payroll, by the way, and it's probably a good place to segue to that. And that is February 15th is the general date, but there's also an opportunity to use alternative metrics to arrive at your FTE number, the average of all of last year or the average of a comparable period of time a year ago. You can choose which one you want to qualify under. And we did that, not so much for South Florida, but nationally, there are businesses that are very seasonal in nature. And so, different times a year might look different. And maybe they were just about to ramp up hiring, or maybe they were ramping up hiring as we speak, or maybe they were about to decelerate their hiring. In essence, they don't really have employment in April and May, but they have a lot of employment in February or March. So we provided that flexibility to make sure we captured all the different nuances.
Thank you, Senator. Julia asks, are there any reasons that you'd be declined by the SBA if you don't provide the correct documentation? And I think to clarify her question, if she doesn't have all the proper documentation, will she be straight out rejected, or will she be notified and be able to re-add that information in her application process?
Well, I think, ultimately, the only reason I could think someone would, and there may be some other unforeseen reason why someone would be declined, but ultimately the key here is if you can prove eligibility, you're going to get this. And you prove eligibility by confirming your status, you're a business, and your payroll. And so I would imagine as long as you can prove that you have status as a company that existed by a date certain, and that you had payroll by a date certain, and that you were meeting that payroll. Now, that I don't know what other reason someone would be disqualified, assuming that they meet the size criteria and so forth. There's no sectoral prohibition. In essence, a lot of people ask, does this apply to a dentist? Does this apply to an accounting firm? If you meet the criteria, it does. So there's no industries that are excluded from it. And the documentation really comes down to, are you registered with an employer identification number with the IRS? And number two, did you have payroll by a date certain that you can verify? And I imagine, unless that payroll was all cash basis, it'd be difficult not to be able to prove it.
Thanks, Senator. Marisol has a question, and she's wanting to know if her employees have already applied for unemployment benefits due to reduced hours. Is her company still eligible for PPP? And at what point does she need to begin using those funds? Sorry.
Well, she has, yeah, the answer is yes. She would be eligible to, the employees would be eligible. Obviously, they may be the people you try to hire back. But if you don't, if they don't want to come back, and it's their choice, then you can hire others, or you can use a higher percentage of your funds for the lease or rent or the utilities and so forth. And then at the end of the process, when the books close, you would have to document that and be able to show mitigating circumstances. We tried to hire back our employees, but a bunch of them were on unemployment and didn't want to come back. We posted these ads, tried to hire people. We couldn't find enough to hit our FTE number. As far as the period is concerned, look, the period applying closes on the 30th of June. The goal here is to keep people on payroll over the next 6 to 8 weeks of time, and that's where the bulk of it should be spent. But again, there is adjustments made for when you enter the system. You can't expect someone to get the loan on the 15th and do 8 weeks before the 30th of June. So that's the cutoff for applying. It's not the cutoff for the disbursement of funds. What we want to ensure is that the bulk of it is being spent on payroll as close as possible to your FTE numbers prior to the crisis. But the time frame in which you structure that is flexible. It doesn't cut off on the 30th of June.
Senator, we got a great question from Angela. She's wanting to know if you can touch on the forgivable nature with these loans. She goes ahead and applies, qualifies, and receives that money. Touch on, what process she'd have to go through if she wants to get those loans forgiven.
Well, I think the process will ultimately be whoever's still servicing it, but and I'm not even sure that process has been created yet because it's a year down the road in terms of the technical aspect of it. But I can tell you what it was intended to look like, and that is a year from now, when the time comes to close the books on this, depending on when you got it, that date won't be the same for everybody. You would basically say, here were my expenses during the 8-week period of time in which I utilized these funds. And I took out $20,000 and I spent $20,000 on payroll. When you add up my payroll costs, my utility benefits and so forth, rent and more, it adds up to equal to or even more than what I took out. And that would be the way to close the books on it.
Thank you, Senator. I know that when President Trump has been talking about the checks that'll be dispersed to individuals, there's been timeframes talked about. But with respect to PPP, what do we think ballpark that timeline is going to be? I know it's still very early. That's getting ironed out right now. But what's a ballpark estimate that we think these funds can be drawn down?
Well, that's a good question, obviously, for the lenders as well, because it's their paper that's being pushed at the front end. I mean, this is not a perfect analogy, but in many ways, if you think about it, it's sort of like you can take your ATM card to a bank that may not even be your own and withdraw funds, and you pay a fee if you're not a depositor in that institution. But that cash came out of their cash. Now, ultimately, it's settled on the backside, except this is coming out in $30, $50, $100, $300,000 chunks, so it's a big ATM. But ultimately, I think it comes down to both the capacity of the lending institution to move the money and get it backfilled by the federal government. But theoretically, again, I don't know all the technical answers to it, but there's no underwriting, there's no credit check, there's none of this going on. So theoretically, it should be pretty quick. It should be a matter of days, not weeks. Especially if you can verify very quickly eligibility, the existence of the business and the payroll number. Perhaps the bankers can talk a little bit more about how the back shop on something like that looks like, but because I'm sure their lawyers are going to want to have a role to play in making sure that they're meeting all the criteria that's being created. But I don't think this would look anything like a traditional lending instrument in terms of the delay and things of that nature. I mean, there's no title to run, there's no credit to run, there's none of these other issues that come into play.
I think from the banking side, Senator, I think we're just waiting for the standard operating procedures to be launched by the SBA, just to understand that. And I think I know we have a few banks on the phone today, and I think that's the biggest challenge, just to understand, is it a one-pager note that you sign? And and hopefully that'll be out shortly.
Yeah, it will not be. I mean, I can tell you it's going to be less than 2 or 3 pages. This is not going to be these crazy documents that nowadays we have to comply with to, prove you're not a member of Al Qaeda, to prove that, you're not a drug dealer, to prove that you're not all these other things. I mean, it's not that. It's literally 2, 3 sheets of paper at most. And I think a lot of it at the back end is going to be some of the disclaimer language and the terms and on the forgivability and so forth. But I think when you look at the actual information that you're going to be collecting from the applicant, it's going to be very condensed.
Thanks, Senator. Rand has reached out and he says that he has an LLC. He's been in business for almost 2 years. He's the only one that is in the business. He does not have a payroll. What can he do to apply for PPP? Is he eligible?
Yeah, the sole proprietorship. And so absolutely. I mean, it's a business concern. It has 1 employee. This is 1 employee, 50 employees, 150 employees is irrelevant. If I imagine as an LLC, they're operating under subchapter S, and either way, the bond or whatever mechanism they're operating under, they that'd be pretty straightforward, you know, in terms of providing payroll. I do want to caveat one thing that I didn't mention, and that is that when it comes to salaries, it covers the first $100,000 of any salary. So if one of your salaries is someone making 250, you're going to get up to 100,000 of that 250. You're not going to be able to that in the calculation of the eligibility amount. So that's an important point to make here. Again, that was a constraint on the dollars that were available.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was actually my next question. Someone was wanting to know what the maximum threshold is relating to that salaries. Thank you.
Yep, and the maximum amount is also 10 million. You know, obviously there won't be a tremendous number of loans in that category, but there might be some. But there are certainly some in the 2 or 3 million range on when you add up 250% of payroll and rent, things of that nature.
If there's someone who's an independent contractor, if they apply for unemployment, can they then apply for an SBA loan as an individual?
Yeah, I just don't think they can cover the same period, right? So that's the catch there, is you can't be on both. If you're drawing payroll, you're not unemployed. So it can't be for the same period of time. So that would be the catch.
All right, thank you. We have another question. This individual, she owns several businesses with different partners. How does that affect the process with PTP if you have, different partners owning those businesses? Is it just one application?
Yeah, so well, that touches a little bit on the association rule, but it would not just be one application. I imagine each one of these businesses would have their own employer identification number. Most businesses are set up that way for purposes of liability anyways. So it's possible, from what they're describing to me, from what I'm hearing, you have a group of partners that varies depending on the entity. So you might own 4 restaurants, one with this partner, one with that partner, one with the other partner. Each of those are independent entities. Where the question lies is on how they write the association rules, which is still an ongoing process. Meaning, if I'm a 51% owner of multiple businesses in the same line of work, are you going to add up all of my employees as a collective of 500, or are you going to split them into individual entities? And I can tell you that that's going to be very industry specific. We did put specific language in the bill that makes it clear that for restaurants and hotels, this cross association is not applicable because of the nature of those businesses and because they're the ones that were first shut down. I mean, if you think about the first people shut down because of travel and hospitality, it was them. When it comes to every other sector, there are existing rules in place that include things like how much control does the individual partner exert over their employees. There's already SBA guidelines on association. But if they happen to be just separate businesses that have nothing to do with each other than an owner involved in common with all 4, I think that's pretty clear ground when you add in some of the SBA exceptions that are already in statute, and whoever advises you legally can look at that. So I don't want to give bad information on it, but by and large, in most cases, that what they've described to me shouldn't be a problem.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question comes from Joe. He wants to know if churches, parishes, and/or their parochial schools covered at all in the CARES Act.
Well, that's one of the hot issues, right? And that is the association rules don't exist for not-for-profits. And because the SBA only does emergency loans for not-for-profits, it doesn't do standard 7A loans. So that's something the SBA is writing up right now, and it's a tough one because it implicates goodwill, it implicates Easter seals, and it implicates archdiocese as an example. I do think there are operations under the archdiocese, for example, Catholic Health Services and others, that depending on how they're structured, can make the argument that they're in a completely different line of work and are not controlled by that entity, right? So the Archbishop doesn't tell the medical professionals at Catholic Health Services or Catholic Hospice how to treat their patients. That might not be the case when it comes to parishes per se. So the answer to that question is 501c3s, even if they're religious institutions, are covered as long as they're under 500 employees. The question becomes, is being a member of a denomination under the control of an archdiocese or under the control of some other similar central authority going to disqualify you from it? And the answer is we don't know yet, because there's a lot of input. It is one of the two hottest issues that both SBA and Treasury are hearing from members of Congress and all over the country. The other hot issue is the role of venture capital. And that is, if a venture capital firm owns a stake in a small business, is all the other ownership of the venture capital attributed, the employees of all the other things that they're owners of attributed to the 500. And so there's some talk about whether it's 25% or 33% venture ownership. So that's one. And then the other hot issue is the association rules as they apply to 501c3s, because frankly, it disproportionately would impact some of the denominations more than others.
Thank you, Senator. Definitely appreciate that.
Spencer, we have
Josh,
about
go
5
ahead.
minutes, so maybe a couple more questions.
Okay, absolutely. I know this is really early, Senator, to cover, and it may wade into the rumor section of the pool. But we had a question from Joshua. He's wanting to know what senators are talking about with respect to stage 4. Is it going to impact folks' rent or other bills that they have to pay? And if there's anything that you can, or at the very least suggest that you would like to see within a phase 4 type of legislation package. Can you cover that?
Well, let me say there might be a 3A at some point here, depending on how long this goes, because as we've already discussed, it's possible that the funds for some of these different things could be exhausted. It's also interesting, by the way, that the more employees are able to benefit from the Paycheck Protection Plan program, the less people will be going on unemployment. So there's a discussion now about whether, if after a few weeks it appears that not all the money is being spent on the unemployment side because people are still attached to their employer, whether some of that money could be repurposed to extend this program or to add, allow more people into it. So there is a chance that this goes further, at least in some parts of the country, and we may have to come back and sort of replenish what we did here with this. But I think a true stage 4 is, we're talking about a recovery. This is an emergency action to sort of stabilize and lower some of the damage being done to the economy to the extent possible. I think stage 4 would be recovery. And there's talk about that now. Obviously, you heard the president talk yesterday about how the U.S. can now borrow at basically 0 interest rate. And that's the perfect time to pay today's prices for tomorrow's infrastructure. And he's using numbers like $2 trillion, which is a lot of money, obviously. And there's no way you can do $2 trillion in a year. These are future projects as well. Beyond that, I do think some of the things you've outlined are going to be in conversation. And that is, so you're a small business and you paid your employees and you made your rent payments, but you weren't able to service your debt and you weren't able to do, and it's going to take you time to stand up. So going back to hotels for a second, a lot of our travel here locally is seasonal, right? And so the season ain't going to be here again until next year. We're not going to be able to recreate a season of June and July. Then you're going to have uncertainty. There's a lot of people that have been damaged by this economically. And even if we opened up tomorrow, it's going to be some time before they're ready to go out and take long vacations and trips. Then there's the big conventions and trips of that nature. And just because your convention got canceled this year doesn't mean you're going to have 2 conventions next year. So that business has been lost. So I think it's going to take some of these industries some time. The local bakery might be able to get up and go pretty quick, but some others may not. And so the question is, how do we deal with that? Because even despite their best efforts, there might be some real cost and debt impediments. So there's been some conversation about what something like that would look like. And then, I'm concerned about the commercial real estate market. Even some of the big tenants are telling their owners, we're not paying. We're not going to pay you this month. And so I'm also concerned about some of the problems that the contagion that could spread into commercial real estate and what that could potentially mean. So there's been some conversation about that as well. Because even if you're forbearing a payment, you still owe it, right? So even if they're telling you, we're not going to charge you this month, we're not going to charge you next month, it doesn't mean they're not going to charge you. It means you have to come back and pay it at some point. And it's not like your revenues are going to spike by a commensurate amount. So there's going to be some issues there that have to be dealt with. And the last point, which I was very disappointed in at the last minute, was the impact this is going to have on consumer credit. And there are people that are not going to be able to make payments for the next couple of months simply because they're not working, they don't have any income. And that's fine. I mean, they may not foreclose on you, but your credit's going to take a hit. And that's problematic because that means people are not going to have access to the real estate market or some other consumer markets for some time until it recovers. So I hope that we can address that issue, because these people have done nothing wrong. We have told them, the government at every level has told them, don't work and don't go and get paid. And so they have to make their payments, and they're going to have their credit damaged. And I think that could be a real big impediment to recovery if we don't address that as well.
Well, Senator, thank you. Not sure if you wanted to say any parting words, and I'm going to ask the mayor for the same, and then we're going to close the meeting down. No, we're a little over, but I think this has been very valuable information. Senator?
Yeah, look, we'll stay in touch with you guys. Thank you, Mayor. The mayor's been great from day one. We talked about this over a week ago when he was still in house arrest or quarantine, whatever they call it. But and we already talking about sort of the role that the economic development organizations here could do in getting outreach. This is a new program that's never existed before. So without you guys, there's no way that we could get people knowledgeable about this and taking advantage of it. And so thank you guys for hosting this, and we probably will have to do it again at some point, just to keep tabs on it.
I know the Beacon Council and the Chamber stand ready to do that. Want to echo everybody's thanks to all your efforts. I know you all have been working around the clock, especially you, Senator, and really appreciate your working on behalf of the citizens of South Florida. Mr. Mayor, I want to give you a chance to say a few words.
I want to thank the senator. I think that the work that he did in Washington is fabulous. We still have more challenges, and we don't know, Senator. We don't know what this may transform fundamentally the way that we do business in the United States. And there's some sectors that are going to win, some sectors are going to lose because of what's happened. And again, I want to take my hat off to you. The work that you did up in Washington is fabulous. You're trying to mitigate this impact as much as possible. And, I pledge that we will work with you to get this money into the hands of our workers, which are, you're right. We're the ones that told them they can't go to work. We're the ones that told them we can't get a paycheck, and for the health and well-being of everybody else. But, again, thank you for your efforts, and we're here to help you in any way possible.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for those words, and thank you for all you're doing, even from house arrest, as the senator said.
I'm free. I'm free right now, though. I'm out.
You gotta get out of jail free card. I know Monday, but glad to have you back in action, and really glad to have your leadership, because you've really gotten out in front of this before even the rest of our neighbors and state. So thank you for that. And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are seeing some of those challenging times of our lives, and it's been very encouraging, though, to see all of us pulling together and responding as a community. I want to let you know that the Chamber and the Beacon Council will continue to put forth content relevant to your business and to your recovery. So please tune into our websites and our social media. And that concludes our virtual town hall. I want to give it over to my colleague, Mike, for any final words. Mike?
Alfred, thanks a lot, and thanks to all the panelists, Mr. Mayor, Senator, Victoria, Pablo. It's all appreciated. My word for the day, the last word that I want to leave you with, is urgency. I just think that we have to move with extreme urgency so that we get these resources to our businesses, and via our businesses to our citizenry as soon as possible.
Amen.
Thank you. And with that, everyone, please stay safe and stay healthy. So long.